So the second to last question lecture is on eye movements, and you might think that it's kind of odd to have eye movements as a topic in a sensory physiology class, but eye movements are very important for your ability to see clearly. They have developed in order to help you see. And surprisingly, we all look at the eyes and we notice that they move, but there are actually 5 types of eye movements that have distinctly different properties. They move differently and they have different functions. And so we'll look at some of them in today's lecture. So one of the things that eye movements do is focus on the fovea. So the fovea is where you see clearly, and it is what determines whether you can do things like reading. So I want all of you to fixate on this, my finger, where you see my hand thing, okay? And what will appear on the screen is an O or a C. And I want you to make out which ones are the O's. And when you see an O, hit the table as hard as you can. Okay, get ready, get set, go. Okay, some saw a few O's correctly, but you notice that that was at the very end of the session. And the reason for that was that initially the O's and the C's were way off in your peripheral retina. And only when they got close to your fovea could you see the difference between the two. So that shows you how important the fovea is for things like reading. The other thing is try to read this. Not very easy when it's moving, right? So when things move on your retina, you can't make out what they are. So a lot of the eye movements are trying to eliminate that movement. Okay? So 2 things. They're trying to keep things on the fovea and trying to eliminate things moving on the back of the retina. The movement and the fovea are the 2 important things the eye movements are trying to do. Now there's, as I said, there are 5 different distinct types of eye movements. And we'll cover the unique role each one plays and how it solves that problem, how it addresses it. Okay, the first one is saccades. Now, if you're near someone, you might try to try the following. You can try putting your fingers out to either side of someone sitting near you and have that person look from one finger to the other finger, back and forth, and see what the movement looks like. You should not, I'll do that for the audience here. You notice you can't see my eyes move. You know they're over here and you know they're over there, but they're moving too fast for you to actually see them during the movement. Okay? And that's because this is the fastest movement that the body makes. And it does so for an important reason. While you're making the movement, you're blind. The eye is spinning from one point to the other point, and you want to minimize the time that you can't see, because something can happen while your eyes are moving, and you want your eyes still. Now, again, if you're sitting beside someone, you can ask the person to try to make a slow movement from one to the other. I'm trying as hard as I can to make a slow movement. And you can't. You may think you're making a slow movement by breaking it up into little steps, but each one is just as fast. Okay? So you have no ability, unlike like a hand movement, you can make it quickly or you can make it slowly. The eye movements, you have no control over their speed. They're preset. The other type of eye movement is called vergence. Okay? And the first one was it tried to point both eyes at whatever you want to look at. And it moved the eyes moved in the same direction. This one's different because if you put one finger in front of the other finger, your eyes move slowly from one to the other. If you look at a person near you, you can see their eyes move back and forth. And you notice here that the eyes are moving in the opposite directions, okay? So when you look at something near, the eyes move in. When you move at something far, the eyes move out. Now, the other type of eye movement is a pursuit eye movement. This is what you do when you follow a ball in a tennis game or a football game or anything. Any small object, you try to track your finger back and forth. You're using this pursuit eye movement to function. Now, you can see that you can try moving your finger slowly, and you'll see that you can see your finger clearly. Or you could take a piece of paper with writing on it, move it slowly, and you can still read what's happening. When you speed it up, you'll find that the finger isn't clear and you can't read that piece of paper. Now the other thing is the VOR. So this is, instead of moving the finger, you keep your finger still, and instead you turn your head back and forth. Okay? And you can find that when you move your head pretty quickly, that finger stays steady. If I look at you, I can see your faces clearly, even when I'm shaking my head rather rapidly. And you can read the things on the screen still clearly, even when you shake your head rapidly. So the VOR is pretty fast, unlike the pursuit thing, which was fairly slow. And the last one is we've done that. Oh yeah, the VOR also works in the dark. And the way to test that is to close your eyes and put your hand gently against your eye. So put your hand gently against your eye, and then move your head a little bit to one way to the other. You can feel your eyes moving. If you make a big head movement, you'll find it sort of does some bouncing things. Besides moving slowly back and forth, it goes back and forth quickly. And that's nystagmus, something that I think we might cover later today. And usually this optokinetic system is related to that sense of self-motion that I mentioned many times already during the course. Now, the eyes move by way of 6 different eye muscles that surround the eye. They are attached to the back of the head, and they attach to the front of the eye. Normally, the motor neurons, they're tonically active. They're contracted, and they're pulling on the eye. And the way the eye moves is one muscle relaxes and the other muscle contracts more. And they work in pairs. There are 3 pairs of eye muscles. There's one that work horizontally, ones that work vertically, and ones that work torsionally. We'll find out what torsional is in a moment. So here, this eye muscle is called the lateral rectus. That's because the nose is over here, and this is the side of the head. And it turns the eye away from the nose. This one is the medial rectus, and it turns the eye nasally or towards the nose. This muscle is the superior rectus, and it turns the eye upward. Now, this little line here I drew, and it was a little mark on your iris, and you notice that it's tilted a little bit towards the nose. Okay? If I click on this eye muscle, the eye goes down, but notice that the top of this is tilted a little bit away from the nose. So there's also, besides moving up and down, it turns the eye a little bit. The other muscles are the oblique eye muscles. There's one here, a superior one, that turns the eye instead of towards the eye, mainly in this direction, towards the nose. So you can see that the whole globe rotates around. And this muscle here does the opposite. It turns the eye away from the nose. But notice they also have a vertical component. This one turns it down, and this one turns it up. Okay, so a little bit of these 6 muscles, the eye can be stabilized no matter what the head is doing. I recently bought myself a nice drone. I showed you some drone pictures that I took. And the camera on this drone has something similar. It can rotate about 3 different axes. It can rotate up and down, left and right, and then like torsionally. So that if the drone turns one way, the eye turns the opposite way. And the result, you can have the drone up there and it's being rocked by waves of wind and whatnot, and the picture is crystal clear because the camera turns in the opposite direction that the drone is turning. And many of your cameras that on your iPhones have a similar property, that you can move your iPhone around and still get quite clear pictures because the camera shifts slightly where the lens is pointing to stabilize. So the VOR is what does most of the stabilization when your eye is turning, and the circuit we saw was this short circuit to the eye, to the muscles. And we can see here the eye turning. And then something funny happens. After the head stops turning, the eye turns back to the needle position. Why is that? Well, the canal is just producing action potentials during the turn, okay? It's just producing an increase in action potentials as the head is turning. When the head turn stops, there is no longer any action potential, extra action potential coming down. And this muscle relaxes and comes back to its normal position. So you need something else to help it out. And the thing to help it out is this thing called the indirect pathway. So this short one is the direct pathway, and this other one is the indirect pathway. Notice here now, the head has stopped turning. There's no more signal, extra signal coming from the canal. But because of this little circuit, the action potentials keep going and keep this muscle contracted. Okay. And this circuit here is just action potentials starting up here, going around, going out here, but also coming back. So these action potentials keep circulating here. And the structure here is called the PPH, prepositus hypoglossi. I wouldn't worry too much about the name. PPH is enough. Okay, you can try it yourself too. Look at someone, turn your head, and you notice you can keep looking at that person even with your head turned. Okay? That's because of this circuit. This is sort of like a memory, a short-term memory. And it's actually doing something like doing calculus. What it's doing is adding up all the action potentials that the canal signaled, and producing a tonic signal that is composed of a sum of all those canal action potentials. The canal is signaling how fast your head is turning, and it's converting that to a tonic thing of how far your eye has to be rotated. So maintaining a tonic level at that position. So converting velocity to position, that's what calculus is all about. For those that remember calculus from high school or early university. So it's neat to see a structure in the brain performing calculus. And you'll see that this is important for other reasons as well. So just repeating what I said before, the action potentials arrive from the vestibular via this indirect pathway, and then the exponentials are sent to the motor neurons from the circuit to keep the muscle contracted at its new position. So they're adding a level. So you've got two pathways. One is just active during the turn, and the other one, which is the sum of all this, is a tonic level that is maintained after the turn. So you take velocity and convert it to a position level. Next one we'll look at is saccades. So this simulates what happens when you read a sentence. And you can see that during the saccade, everything becomes blurred. Between the saccades, only the thing that you're looking at is clear. The rest of the sentence is blurred. Now, you're not conscious of that, but that, in fact, is what your eye sees. Now, the turn is very quick, and it's produced by a phasic response that's sent to the eye muscles that can be as high as 1,000 action potentials per second. So really, really fast, and that generates a really, really fast eye movement, a saccade. So on average, how many saccades do you think you make a day? Okay. All those in favor of 1,000, hit the table. All those in favor of 10,000, hit the table. All those in favor of more than 100,000, hit the table. Those are right. You actually make something like 1,700, 170,000 saccades a day. That's a lot of saccades. Now, these saccades come from another structure called the PPRF, the paramedial ponte reticular formation. And that's located near this nucleus, which is the nucleus that sends the signal to these two muscles. Now there's one this is the one on the left side of the head, and there's a parallel one on the other side of the head, innervating these two muscles as well. So it's symmetric. Now, as in the VOR, you have a direct and an indirect pathway. The direct pathway turns the eye as quickly as possible from one position to the other position, and then the indirect pathway holds it there. So between when you read a sentence, you get a burst that moves the eye to the next word, and then this tonic signal holds the eye at its new position. And then another burst moves the eye to the next word, and a higher tonic position holds the eye in a further position. And finally you get to the end of the sentence, and you get a lot of tonic activity after another burst. So it accumulates all the saccades that you made. Okay, now some questions. Okay, this is a normal eye movement, normal saccade. This is some possible saccades that can be made when this circuit is broken. This is a circuit that's from this reverberating circuit in the PPH. Okay. Which of these eye movements will the brain make? This one, or this one? Okay, you got it right. Okay, a burst comes from here and goes here and moves the eye quickly. That produces this part of movement. But this is in here. Okay, this is gone now, this signal. This is still going around here, but it's not getting out. And as a consequence, the eye slides back to the position it came from. It can't stay there. Okay. Oops. I have to press the correct answer to get to the next question. Okay, the next question is what happens here? So you can see a little X here. I missed it for a moment there and I couldn't figure out where the lesion was. So there's a little X here. That means that there's a partial lesion here. You can still get action potentials. You can make this, a normal burst comes from here, goes to here, and goes around here and comes out of this circuit as well. And then there's a partial damage, so not as much comes to here or to here. Which of these things is the correct answer? This one? I didn't hear anything. Oh. Okay, well, this one? Or this one? Silence. Try again. This one? Ah, good. Okay, yes. What would happen is that you'd make a movement. You wouldn't get as far as you wanted to. So then you'd make another movement. Others of that. You wouldn't get as far as you wanted to. So you'd make another one. And eventually you'd get there. Okay? So, next, what happens if this thing were gone? Okay? You still get this thing, but this part of the direct pathway is gone. Which of these movements would it be? This one? This one? I thought I heard something. Good. Yes. So what would happen is you wouldn't go fast, okay, because this burst is gone. 1,000 action per second is not there. So you slowly, but this thing is still here. Okay? It climbs up and generates a tonic activity. But that tonic activity only gets the eye slowly, but eventually gets to exactly where it should be, but very slowly. Okay, so that's what kind of eye movements you get with lesions of the circuit. Now, while you're fixating, I mentioned that there's a hill of activity in your superior colliculus that allows you to fixate. Okay? Keep your eye staring where you want to fixate on. And there's another hill of activity up in the frontal eye field too that is signaling this to maintain fixation. Now, the way you maintain fixation is because there's an omnipause neuron that inhibits the PPRF from firing. Okay? So this thing can't send out its burst of action potential because of this hill of activity while you're fixating. Now then, in order to fixate, what you have to do is something appears out here in the periphery, and that reduces the hill of activity and produces another hill over here. And that hill over here allows the PPRF to become active and the saccade to be generated. And as a consequence, you could look at this thing that's over here in your periphery. Now, what is it then that stops the eye movement? Okay, you're going here at the eye movement that move the eye here went in the 1,000 actions per second. What is it that stopped it? So it's fixating there. Is it the back of the eye? Okay, is it vision? No, it's not vision, because vision is too slow. Vision would take 100 milliseconds to get to your visual system and be processed, and then to notice, to then send the signal to stop the eye at the target. You would have gone way past it. So vision is too slow. The other possibility may be there's a signal coming from the muscles. We said the muscles send out an eye, all muscles send out eye position signals. And maybe it's the muscle that goes, okay, I've gone far enough, maybe I should stop here. And that isn't true either. Many people thought that these proprioceptors were involved, but they removed them and found the eye stopped just exactly where it was supposed to stop. So what other thing could it be? Well, it could be this thing here. And in fact, it is. Okay? This thing here is the brain's own signal. It's the corollary discharge. It tells what the position of the eye should be. Okay? It is the position signal that the eye will be, because that's where the tonic signal tells it to be. So the eye will be held at this position. So it's like a guided missile. So the guided missile has measures of where it's gone, and as a consequence can get to its target. So the saccade is something like that. It's sort of like you shoot out the guided missile, and it goes fast, 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 and then this signal here then tells it when to stop, okay? Or where to stop. Now, how does this work? This corollary discharge work? Okay. This circuit, this corollary discharge, again comes from this structure here, and it's involved in every movement you make. It's involved in the VOR. It tells you what position you are in the VOR. It tells you what position you are during pursuit eye movement, and it tells you what position you are during saccades as well. So it's a neural estimate of what the eye position is. As a consequence, it's very useful for stopping saccades. You can see here that the saccade started here and then moved over to here and then stopped. Well, it is the signal from this structure here that guided the hill from here to here and told the eye, okay, I've reached. Your eye, I think, has reached the position it should be at. And then you have we should stop the PPRF from firing. So you've got this internal circuit in the eye. To start the saccade off, then this measures how far it's going. It moves the hill over, depending on how far it's going. And then when the hill, the signal here says, okay, you've hit the target, the position you want to hit, the hill gets to the fovea and stops the whole circuit from firing. The saccade ends. So you've got an internal sort of guided missile that's controlling the position of your eye during saccade. Now you remember that the saccades had a quick pathway, one from the eye to the LGN and then superior colliculus, and now we know it goes to the PPRF and guides, starts the movement and stops the movement. We also know that a signal goes through another pathway, through the parietal eye field, through the prefrontal cortex, through the frontal eye field, and then down to the superior colliculus, and again through the same structure to start and stop saccades. Okay. Normally, you saw one eye move, the other eye move, and they move exactly the same amount. Okay? This is good because it means when I move my eyes from one person to another person, I see only one of you, not two of you, when I land on my new position. So to not see double, both eyes have to make exactly the same eye movement. And it's the cerebellum that calibrates these saccades and every other type of eye movement. So suppose that this muscle became weak. This is what the doctors would do to help you see better. And when muscle became weak, this eye points in this direction, this eye points in another direction, and you see two different things from each eye. You have strabismus and you see double. Well, what the doctor does is put a patch, surprisingly, over your good eye. And that, with time, forces a bigger signal to be sent to the weaker eye. As a consequence, it moves more, but then this thing moves more as well, because it can't see where it's gone. So then the doctor takes the patch off, and again with time, the brain teaches this muscle to receive less circuit, less signal. So, and this whole calibration process involves the cerebellum, and with luck, the cerebellum will be able to counter this weakness. And the only time the strabismus will persist is when it either exceeds the capabilities of the cerebellum. That is, there's no way you can, if this is totally paralyzed, for example, there's no way you can send signal to it to move. Or the cerebellum itself is damaged in some ways. Okay. Oops. Not quite right. This movement should be a little faster, but it's not that. This is called nystagmus. So the eye is supposed to move slowly in one direction and then quickly back again. And that's what happens if I turn my head a lot. The eye would go slowly and then quickly make a saccade back to where it's supposed to be. Turn slowly and then quickly make saccades back to center. Okay, you can see what's called a slow phase, followed by a quick phase from the saccadic system. And the frequency, you can sometimes see that the frequency increases here, and that's because the person wants to look in the direction that he's turning. If you want to see something in the direction you're turning, you'll turn your eye in that direction, but the frequency of your saccades will become quicker. So each time the eye turns as much as it can, or if you overwrite that, it turns in the direction that you want to look at, but makes sense, as I said again, the saccades more frequent. Now, the other thing that can happen is that you can get nystagmus, like your head isn't moving. Okay? And that means there's something wrong. There's something wrong in the head. What could be wrong in this head to produce this type of nystagmus? The head is still. Any suggestions? Well, maybe it's one of the canals, or in the vestibular system, a canal is damaged. Would you think it's on the left or the right side? Everyone in favor of the right, hit the table. Everyone in favor of the left, hit the table. No one's quite sure. So this looks like this. If you my mouse went dead. So notice that the saccades look exactly like this. Okay, they're in the same direction. The trace there is the same. Okay, your eye movements are doing exactly the same thing, as if you were turning to the right. That means that the horizontal canal, that means that there's more signal coming from the right side than the left side. Now, when your head is still, there's no way you can make the right side produce more activity. So a lesion can only produce less activity. So the lesion must be on the left side to produce this type of imbalance that produces this type of eye movement. Okay? And okay, there's another type of nystagmus that can occur. And you can see here that it's different from the one we saw before. The eye goes fast in one direction and then gradually slides back to where it came from. It goes fast in one direction, slides gradually back to where it came from. Well, this is produced by a lesion of the PPH, the structure that we looked at previously. So you can't maintain the tonic position to which the eye went to, and then you get this type of nystagmus. Okay, the next step of eye movement, Vergence eye movement. There's a lot of interesting things happening here. Okay? You can see, first of all, the lens is changing in size, okay? When you look near, they become round. When you look far, they become flat. You can also see that the pupil is changing in size. Okay? The pupil is changing in size at the beginning of either movement, one going farther and the one going nearer. And the reason it's doing that is when the pupil is small, you see clearer. Okay? If the pupil became tiny, and your fovea was very, 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 very sensitive, you could see clearly all the time. You don't need a lens. So anytime it can become smaller, you can see clearly, even though the target is not at the right distance and your lens isn't at the right diameter. So what systems are working here? Well, first of all, you get a blur. Things aren't the right sharpness, and that's sensed by the brainstem, and it sends a signal to adjust the lens shape and to move the eyes. At the same time, you see retinal disparity, differences in the two eyes. You saw here at the beginning of each movement, the two eyes seeing something different. Okay? In one case, they're to the medial side of each eye. The other case, they go to the lateral side of each eye. So each eye isn't seeing the same thing. So this is the retinal disparity that the visual cortex sees. And it sends out an adjustment to adjust the lens and to adjust the eye movement. Okay? So both these signals are being generated, and the best sort of adjustment occurs when there's both a blur command and a retinal disparity command to move the Vergence system. Okay, the next eye movement is the pursuit eye movement. Here we are looking at a bee that at first is still and then starts moving. Okay, still, starts moving. Again, it's still, and then it's focused on the fovea again. That's because, first of all, now it starts moving. That takes a while for the brain to register that. It makes a Vergence eye movement, then a saccade, and then a pursuit with the bee in the center of the fovea. Okay? Vergence here, saccade here, continue with pursuit, not Vergence, pursuit, back. Pursuit here to stabilize the eye, a saccade, and then more pursuit to get the eye on the bee on the fovea. Okay, the circuit for all that comes from the eye. You go to V1, you go to MT, then remember MSTL. Okay, that was used to track objects, to see things that fly by. That signal goes to the cerebellum and then to the brainstem and the circuits that drive the eye muscles. So that tells this circuit here measures the retinal slip and provides a speed signal that sends a velocity command to the eye muscles to pursue the target at the correct speed. You can also generate a pursuit eye movement without anything moving on the eyes. Now, I forgot to mention that you can imagine that in the very center of these two things, there's an axis. So this is a wheel, and you can try to pursue the center of the wheel just by imagining it. Okay? Normally, you can't pursue without a moving target. Okay? If you try it looking at a friend, okay, tell them to generate a pursuit eye movement, it'll be full of saccades. It'll be a series of saccades. But with this thing, you can imagine that that center, and you can make a pursuit eye movement. You can also make a pursuit eye movement if you hear something going past you, but in the dark or with your eyes closed. And you can also train yourself to make a pursuit eye movement to, for example, your finger moving past your eyes, or back and forth across in front of your head, and you can learn to pursue it. The last thing is fixation. When you fixate, your eyes are trying to be still. But unfortunately, there are tiny little movements still present. You can see the letter A here, and you can see the rods and cones of the fovea. You see that the rods and cones, not the rods and cones, just the cones, because we're staring at it. And you can see the cones sensitive to different colors. The blue one hasn't come out in the right shade there, but the black ones are the blue sensitive cones. So surprisingly, the eye is still moving. So the brain is unable to stop generating little sort of side-to-side movements in all directions of the eye, little slips, and then little saccades, tiny little saccades that try to recenter the eye. And surprisingly, you need these tiny eye movements in order to see. Experimenters have managed to measure these tiny little eye movements and then shift the letter A so that it is perfectly stabilized on the back of the eye. So the same rods and same cones see the A constantly. And when this happens, when you stabilize the image, the A disappears. Okay? So for some strange reason, we need these tiny eye movements they're happening very quickly. This is slowing them down by a considerable amount in order to be able to see. And we haven't figured out what it is why it is that the rods and the cones here and the rods too need this signal, but they do. Okay, let's just summarize then. We have the VOR and the optokinetic system, and that belongs to an old system. The old system developed, you can see these type of eye movements in fish, in frogs. They developed early during evolution. And their purpose is to keep everything stable on the back of the eye. Um, the, your early species haven't developed foveas yet, so they don't have to worry about which part of the eye is being stabilized. They just want things stabilized on the whole eye. So the VOR and the optokinetic system does this. So the VOR responds fast because it's a tiny little reflex. It's not good for prolonged eye movements because the pupil adapts. But the eye and the VOR remains calibrated by the cerebellum. You have the optokinetic system, which helps the VOR, so vision supports your VOR. You saw this when you tried to stand with your eyes closed. The reflex is slow to get going, but that's okay because the VOR is good for the initial part of any movement. And it's best elicited by something that fills the entire back of the eye. Okay? So something that, like you see when you open your eyes and see the whole room. And if the whole room suddenly moved, you would imagine that it moved, or you moved. Then the new system, when you have a fovea, the purpose of these new things is to keep the image on this fovea, because that's where you see clearly. So you have saccades, which point both eyes at whatever object you want interested in. They're fast and they're accurate because you want to maximize the eye, time that the eye is still, and minimize the movement time. And you have no voluntary control over its speed. Then you have the pursuit system, which keeps the eye fovea locked on the target when the target moves. Okay? And the pursuit is reflexive. You normally can't pursue in the absence of a moving target, except in the circumstances that I mentioned back there, but they require training. And the pursuit system is slower than the VOR because it requires this pathway through the brain to your cortex and that long circuit that I mentioned before. And finally, we have the Vergence system, which, because you have two eyes, you want both foveas pointing at the same target, and that's what the Vergence system sees. It prevents double vision or diplopia, and during Vergence, the eyes rotate in the opposite direction, unlike saccades. And that's it for today. So thank you, and we'll see you for the last lecture next week.